All right, howdy, and welcome to the stream. It's another Figma Friday, and hope everyone's week is going well. Mine certainly is. And this Friday, I thought we would discuss using masks in Figma. And now, you may be familiar with masks if you've used other vector-based editing programs or photo editing programs, Illustrator, Photoshop, GIMP, Inkscape, software like that. All have masking capabilities, and Figma does as well. So I thought now would be a good time to go over what masks are and how to make masks in Figma. And then at the end, I have a bit of a use case. So we will develop a little bit of design to show a practical application of how you might take advantage of the mask functionality in Figma. And so to begin with, what are masks? Well, masks are essentially when you use one layer to, as it says on the top here, conceal the contents of another layer, or to only show or to only make visible certain areas of another layer. And I have two examples here, and I could have gone crazy with the number of examples given, but I thought these two did a fairly decent job of explaining what we're talking about when we're talking about masks. And so, as we see here, we have this ellipse shape right here, and we have a photo that I grabbed from Unsplash, and then creating a mask object with these two layers. I created this layer over here, and then at the bottom, bit of a similar story. I have a text layer, a type layer, and then a different shape. I have a rectangle here, and making a mask object out of the two of these results in this bit of text here on the right. And I did this second example to illustrate that masks aren't only used with images and your regular shapes. Almost anything can be made into a mask or can be used as the masking layer. And so shape layers, type layers, images, groups can be used as as the base of your masking object. Frames cannot, however, and so that's just one thing to keep in mind. And you can mask multiple layers at once. You can only have one mask layer, and I'll explain what that looks like in a moment here. But you can have multiple objects or multiple layers being masked. And do remember, masking is it's a non-destructive process. And so once you use the mask functionality, the mask feature, when you make a mask object, you can, nothing is flattened, and so you can click and drag your layers as you see fit in the left sidebar, the layers panel, to move things around. And so nothing will be lost when you turn layers into a mask object. And so let's talk more about mask object, because I've used that phrase quite a bit. And so when you create a mask object, when you select at least two layers and excuse me, click the mask button, you will end up with something that looks like this. And I got this image from Figma, and it's a bit, the image is a bit misleading. It doesn't automatically, I don't believe it automatically puts anything in a frame. We'll find out. I've forgotten since I made this short slide deck. However, the image, all of the layers that you gather together will be placed into a mask object. And the mask object in this case is three different layers. We have the actual mask layer at the bottom, and then two additional objects or two additional layers that are being masked. And the entirety of this is called the mask object, not the frame here at the top here, not the parent. And so we see, speaking of hierarchy, we see that we have a parent frame and we have three children, and since all of the children are hierarchically the same, and not in the z-index, but I'll discuss that in a moment, they are considered siblings of one another. They're sort of on the same level, if you want to think about it that way. And this is when you will see this arrow in Figma, is when you use a mask. And so the layer that the arrow sort of comes out of, as we can see here, will have this icon, which I guess is maybe a crescent moon icon. And where that comes from all the way up to where the arrow ends indicates what is being masked off. And a mask will it will end or it will terminate when it runs into another mask or mask object or reaches the parent, which is either the group or the frame. And in this case, the parent is the frame, so the mask object ends right here. And just a quick note on the Z index, which if you write HTML, CSS, JavaScript, if you do any front-end web dev, you may be familiar with the Z index. And the Z index is the idea, or I guess maybe the Z axis, you can also think about it. The Z axis is, so you have your layers, and if you, okay, so perfect example here. This would be, this is a screenshot of the layers panel in the left sidebar in Figma. And so we have layers that are sort of on top of each other. And if you have a, let's say, let me jump out of the slide deck right quick and come over here. And so let's say that you have an ellipse, and then let's say you also draw a rectangle. I'll go ahead and change the colors on these to make it a bit more obvious what I'm talking about. Okay, so we have these two shapes right here. And so, and if we look over here in the layers panel, we have ellipse 4 and rectangle 3. And so the Z index states sort of which one is, I guess, visually on top or on top of another, or which layer is on top of another in the left sidebar. And so whatever is on top, in this case rectangle 3, we can see that this layer is in the layers panel on top of ellipse 4, and that is confirmed in the canvas. We see that the content of the rectangle sort of goes over and is on top of the content of the ellipse. So going back to, let's see here, yeah, this image right here, we can see that the rectangle, the ready red rectangle, has a higher Z index than the ellipse, the blue ellipse right here. And so the Z index helps us understand not only sort of layer hierarchy, but it also helps us understand how masking works. And masking is, let's go back here, masking is interesting because, at least in Figma, the shape or the layer that decides or acts as the concealer, or it's the object that indicates what's visible and what is not, is on the bottom. And so the layer that does the masking goes below any of the layers that get masked, if that makes any sense. And I've tried to come up with a better way to say that all afternoon, but I have not. And I grabbed this image from Figma, which does a better job of explaining what I mean. And it also draws the Z-axis, so we understand what's going on here. And so what we have, essentially what we're looking at here, are two layers. We have a shape layer, which is this purple ellipse, and we have another layer, which is an image, which is this orange affair right here. And if we want to use the purple ellipse as the mask, hierarchically speaking, it needs to have a lower Z index. It needs to be lower in the layer hierarchy than the image or whatever it is that we're going to mask off. And so we have the check mark icon right here indicating that since speaking of the Z index, speaking of the layer hierarchy, the purple ellipse is below the image, is going to mask, so the purple ellipse is going to mask everything that's above it hierarchically. And so we see that all that's visible here is the image in the shape of the ellipse that's below it. And this example down here is how not to do a mask in Figma. That is to say, you would not want to have the purple ellipse or whatever layer type, shape, text, image, you would want to have that above the object that you wish to make a mask of. And so I understand that that is a bit confusing, and it takes a little bit of practice in Figma to fully understand how this works, but I'll definitely go through some examples to give a better indication of what that exactly looks like. But in other words, the layer doing the masking goes on the bottom, and so that's just the best way to think about it. And just a quick word on alpha channels. And if you use, let's see here, if you're a frequent user of images that end in .png or PNGs, those have alpha channels, or you have access to an alpha channel, which is something that you don't have in like JPEGs, for example. And what the alpha channel is, alpha channels control opacity or transparency of a layer, or in this case, if we're talking about PNGs, of an image. And that's why if you have, that's why PNGs are very popular on websites, apps, and whatnot, because parts of them can be, parts of the image can be transparent, and so you can have part of the background element sort of showing through. And we encounter alpha channels a lot in Figma, and the way we understand alpha channels in Figma is the opacity parameter, and so we can set the opacity and change how see-through an element is. And so, for example, I have let's see here. So for example, I drew this ellipse and I gave it an outside stroke, and I just colored it red for visibility's sake for the stream. The opacity, and we're talking about alpha channels, of the fill is set to 100%. And the opacity of this stroke right here, which is an outside stroke, is set to 50%. And so we can see that some of the white background hex code, FFF, is showing through the outside stroke here, which has, again, opacity of 50%. And we can use, so the mask function in Figma respects your alpha channels. And so if I use this shape right here, this ellipse, to make a mask of this image that I snagged from Unsplash or Google Image Search, I don't remember which, we can see that we have some alpha channel differences going on here. And so the outside stroke, the opacity shows up here in the mask object that I have created. And so that's kind of all there is to it, to masks. And I know that probably sounds like a lot, but again, it's all practice. And we are going to do a little bit of practice. We're going to make something very, very close to this image here. This is a, in material design, you might refer to this as a card, or you might see this, a place where you might see this sort of design is maybe on a website where employees or developers are listed, and you might have some, for example, here, links to their social media profiles, and maybe just a little blurb about them, their name, so on and so forth. And so we're going to make this, or we're going to come very close to making this. We're going to ignore this sort of graphical flair that we see right here, because it's a bit outside of the scope of this stream. However, we could make something like this in Figma using different blend options. Again, that's a topic for a future stream. And so I'm going to go ahead and close the presentation mode. And before we jump right on in to the example of the use case, is I'm going to play around a little bit with these shapes in order to illustrate how a simple mask is made, and so we fully understand the importance of the z-axis, and in making a mask object, we'll have an understanding of the architecture of a mask. And so let's see here. So hierarchically speaking, as stated earlier, the rectangle has a higher z index, and that's corroborated by what we see here in the left side panel. Rectangle 3 is on top of ellipse 4, and so if I select both of these layers, you need to select 2 layers, and when you do, you will see a couple of new icons here at the top in the toolbar. And so one is a component, so we could make this into a component, multiple components, so on and so forth. And then we also see we have our good friend, the Boolean drop down, the Boolean select box. But what we're after is, if you remember that icon, that sort of crescent moon icon, we're looking for the mask icon. And there's also the keyboard shortcut here, which is Control Command M on a Mac keyboard. And so I'm just going to have my layer selected. I'll go ahead and click the mask. And so let's see here. Let me make a copy of that first so we better understand what's going on. I'll make a mask of that. And as we can see, the layer on the bottom with the lower Z index, if we look over here at the new mask object, which has made itself into a group, mask objects are automatically made into a group, and then you could make it a frame if you wanted to. The ellipse, and I can't zoom in on this, but the ellipse has, as we can see, the outline right here, has the crescent moon icon, and having looked at the mask object structure, we can tell about this little arrow here that everything that's above the lowermost layer is going to be masked off. And so in this case, it's going to be rectangle 4. And if I select rectangle 4, I can, of course, move it around like this. And we can see that we can move this layer independently. We can just select that layer in the mask group. And if we move it independently, we see that the mask stays put, the mask being the ellipse. And of course, we can select the ellipse. And we can select the ellipse and move that around as well. And so in this way, and of course, if we want to, for example, move rectangle 4 outside of the mask group, we can do that, no problem. And so in that way, mask groups, or making masks in Figma, is a non-destructive action. And indeed, if I wanted to add additional layers to the mask group, I could click and drag them above the, I could drag them into the mask group, the mask object, and as long as they are above the layer that has the crescent moon icon, it will be masked off. And so I could add additional layers to this if I wanted to. So let's go ahead and we'll make a polygon, something like that. Let's give it a different color. Whoop. Yeah, something like that green there. And we can see that the polygon does not exist in the mask group, but if I drag it above rectangle 4, we can see that it is also now masked off. And then we can continue to move that around, and we can see by moving it around, it still has that ellipse shape because the ellipse is acting as the masking layer because it's at the bottom. And of course, polygon 1 and rectangle 4, we can change the order of these, the Z index, to, if we want the polygon to be visually behind the rectangle, we can just click and rearrange its Z index position here in the left sidebar in the layers panel. And so no matter what, the ellipse at the bottom, even though it has a fill, no longer has a fill because it's acting as the masking layer. And of course, with the ellipse selected, we can, of course, change its dimensions, and that alters how large the mask itself is. And so now that we have an idea of how masks, and almost forgot there, if when you have nothing selected, and so when your canvas looks like this, no layers selected, and you want to see your mask outlines, you can go to View, select Mask Outlines, and now we have this green outline, which is the size and shape of the ellipse here, showing you that there is a mask. I generally have mine turned off. And so there we go. It's just something you can toggle on and off. And so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those for now. And for the remainder of this stream, we are going to we're going to duplicate what we're seeing here in this sort of maybe this is an employee card, or someone who works for an organization. Again, I just found this off Google image search. And so we're going to use using masks, we're going to make this, and we're going to get it as close as we can. Again, we're not going to design for this design flare area right here. That can be, that is, blend modes are a subject for a different stream. And so to begin with, let's go ahead and make the container itself, the card. And so I'll go ahead and grab let's do here, whoop. Let's turn Keycaster on so we can see what I'm typing. There we go. So I'm going to press R to select the rectangle tool, I should say. And let's move image 5 up here. I'm going to go ahead and lock that in place so I don't accidentally grab it. And with my rectangle tool selected, I'm going to draw one roughly the size of the card behind it. What are we looking at? 313 by 494. We'll just call that, we can leave it at 313 by 494. That's fine. I'm going to rename that card. And let's go ahead and get the border radius, corner radius. I have CSS on the brain. And so we're going to bump this up till it looks about right. Something like that. Yeah, something like 66. I'm going to make that just a little bit wider. Yeah, okay, that's not bad. Okay, and then I'm going to move that over here, and I'm going to give it just a regular white fill. There we go, and let's see our card, that's good. Let's go ahead and give it a drop shadow. This is not the order that you have to stick to, or this is not the order that I have to stick to when I'm creating a copy of this design. A lot of these choices can be done at any point. For example, you could do the drop shadow at the very end. I'm just choosing to do it now. One reason for that is since the fill of the card is white and the default canvas color is, or the canvas color here is F5, 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 which of course I could change to whatever I wanted to. Because it might not, on all monitors, it might not be so easy to see this white card on this light gray background. I'm going to add the drop shadow now just to increase visibility. And so again, with that rectangle layer selected, I will click Effects, which will add a drop shadow. Drop shadow is the default effect. And if I click the sun icon, I can change the effects settings. And so we're going to change, let's see here, I don't want any offset in the x-axis. And so I'm going to leave that at 0. Y, I'm going to bump out that up to about 12. And I'll make the blur 24. And so that's pretty close, and I don't have a problem with just having a pure black hex value with an opacity alpha channel at 25%. So I'll go ahead and close that, and looking pretty good so far. And next I'm going to focus on this, I guess, burgundy-ish area at the top here. And so I'm going to duplicate, call that example. I'm going to duplicate this card. So on a Mac, I'll hold down Command and press D. And as we can see here, it says duplicate selection. Figma is telling me what I just did. And so I'm going to call that card mask. And I'm going to select the rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a rectangle. Let's see about how tall is that. It's almost half, isn't it? We'll just call it half. And what's the width here? 317. Let's call that 317. I'm going to drag that over here. I know they're lined up because I saw the alignment red lines. And let's see here, I'm going to make a mask of that red area. And so let's see here, I'm going to call that red top area. Always remember to label your layers as soon as you add them. Just makes your life a lot easier. And so I want to make a mask out of using card mask, which is a duplicate of the card layer. I'm going to select red top area, which I know is not red yet. Bear with, and then I'm going to click the use as a mask button here. And so now we have a mask object called mask group. I'm going to call this top. Whoop. Typing too fast. I'm going to call that top area. And I'll select that layer itself, which is red top area. Which is, let's see here, it's time to rename this. Let's call that, top. No, that's redundant. We'll call it gradient, because we can see here that we have a gradient going on here. It's a little bit lighter in the top right corner and a little bit darker here on the left side. And we can go ahead and create the gradient here. I see we have a fill. That's the default color for Figma. So I'll click the color swatch, and I don't want a solid color, I want a gradient. And so after solid, the next 4 items are gradient types. So we have linear gradient, radial gradient, angular, and diamond, and then lastly image, where you can select an image that you have saved, and that'll be the background. But I want a linear gradient, and it adds a vertical linear gradient, but I want not exactly horizontal. I was playing around with this earlier and it's off by a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and select this. Whoops, here. I'm going to go select this stop and move it to the left edge, and where I move it doesn't really matter that much. And then I'm going to move this stop to the right edge, but I'm going to move it up by a few degrees, maybe, I don't know, was that 8, 10 degrees, something like that. And with this stop selected, I'm going to press I to activate the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to select that color there, and I'm going to select this stop, and again activate the eyedropper, and I'm going to select this color here, and so and press enter and close. And so we now have this top gradient, which is somewhat similar to the one we're seeing here. It's not perfect, but we're not aiming for perfection here. We're teaching the mask. And so I see there's a little bit of an implied bend going on down here, and so I want to emulate that best I can. And so I'm going to select the layer called gradient, and in order to add the bit of a bend there, I need to add an additional point along the vector path. And so to do that, I can press the Enter key to enter the Edit Object mode, which is what you can do with vectors. Or alternatively, I can click this button right here, which is another way to get into the Edit Object mode. And so click that. And I know I'm in the edit Object mode because my toolbar has changed to these tools right here, and it has the big Done button. And I also see the little nodes that indicate the shape of the vector that I have selected. And I'll go ahead and select the pen tool, and when I mouse over any one of these connecting lines between the nodes, or the anchor points you might call them, it tells me where the midpoint is. It adds, so when I mouse over this line, you can see that it adds that little circle icon right there. And so I'm going to move my mouse over there. I see we have, of course, the pen tool selected, so we have the pen tool cursor, and we see the plus sign, and that indicates that when I click, it will add a node there. So I will click, and it wants me to continue on with the vector network, but we're not doing that, so I'll press escape. And I can see that there is a new anchor point added, or a new node, and so I will select the move tool, click once to select that node, and I'm going to, always gets a bit finicky, I'm going to move that down a bit. I'm holding shift, so I know I move directly. I'm only in the y-axis. I'm going to move it down to about right there, and I want to bend that point, and so I want to add Bezier handles on both the left and the right. So with that point selected, with that node selected, I could click the bend tool, or I could also hold down Command and click that node, which, as we can see here, adds a bit of a bend by way of adding Bezier handles to both sides. And that's the default. It's not bad. Let's see here, our vector is set to mirror angle and length. So I'm going to go ahead and click this Bezier handle, and because it's mirrored, I don't need to hold down any keys. I'm going to move it out to about right there. That's looking pretty good. Might be a bit tall. Let's see here. Move that up just a skosh, something like that. Okay, looking good. And so next we want to add, I'll add the vector image last. So now we're going to add the text, and I'm not going to mirror exactly what we see here on the left, but I will press T to select the text tool, and I will click once to add a new type layer, and we're going to type a name. Let's just say Kyle Morton. Oop. Yeah, that's fine. And outfits, okay, maybe make that, well, Yeah, I like that font size actually. We can adjust that later if we don't like it. And so I'm going to move that to the middle, something like that. Maybe make the fill, whoop, not that. There we go, maybe make the fill sort of off-gray color, something like that. It's looking pretty good. Okay, and then it looks like below that we have maybe a Twitter handle or some sort of other handle that begins with the @ sign. And so I'm going to add another text layer, and we'll do @Kyle_Morton. It's just a name I made up. And let's see here, I can see that it's smaller text, so we're currently at 24. Let's see what 16 looks like. Not terrible. Let's see here, regular, I'm going to go ahead and make that extra light. Maybe bump that down to about 12, something like that. Okay, and I just realized I'm actually at 134% zoom, and so we're going to zoom it to 100. And let's see here, I'm going to make that actually 14 just for accessibility reasons. And let's see here, and of course I could make the font weight a bit bigger, but I don't want to get too bogged down in making this as it should be. And so I want to make sure that my font color works or is the same as the one above it. So I'm going to select that type layer, press I to select the eyedropper tool, and then let's see here, 4E, 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 that's the hex code, so I'll just click there. And now we've copied it over, and I'm gonna go make that light. Okay, very good, just to make it a bit more visible, move that down just a skosh. Okay, and then it looks like below that we have a selection of social media icons. And so I will go up to plugins, and I have the Font Awesome Icons plugin installed. So I'll go ahead and click that. And here we go. And I'll see if I can find, wrong way. I'll see if I can find these icons. So the first one is for Behance. There's the first one. Click, and it adds it right there. I'm going to go ahead and move that down. I know it's a bit large. I'm going to go ahead and resize these all at once at the end. And I'm not used to this plugin. Let's see our Font Awesome Icons. Next, we're looking at dribble. Clicked. I wish it didn't go away. That's obnoxious. Let's see here. Bloop. Wonder if I can click and drag. Okay, so we're going to do Facebook. Can I click and drag? No, that's a bummer. Okay, just keep on doing this over and over again. And then we have Insta. Whoop. I started typing and I didn't have the plugin selected. Let's do Insta. That's close. It looks like this might be the old Instagram icon, but that's just fine. So I'll go ahead and click Insta, and it adds it right there. And then lastly, Font Awesome. If anyone from the Font Awesome team, well, actually this is unofficial. Whoever it is that made this plugin, it would be super nice if whenever I clicked to add an icon, the plugin window didn't go away. And then lastly, we have Twitter. So click that, and it adds there. So select my move tool, which is V, and I have Behance right here. What order is this in? Behance, and then Facebook's about here. And then we have Dribble. Whoop. There we go. And then we have Dribble, Facebook. What did I grab? Twitter's at the end, and then we have Instagram right here. And so it added them all as frames. That's fine, I suppose. And so I'm going to select all of these layers. And let's see here. Since we have, I forget what it's called, Smart Arrange on, I believe is what it's called. If I click here, I can zoom in, of course, and make it a little bit smaller. But if I see this blue rectangle with the 3 vertical white lines, if I click that, it's going to arrange them. So if I click, it doesn't arrange them, it doesn't align them vertically. It makes sure that there's an equal amount of space between each item, horizontally speaking. And if I want to arrange them or align them vertically with all of those layers selected, in this case they're all frames, I would come up here to the top in the right sidebar of the design panel and click Align Vertical Centers. And I see that Figma, in one of the recent updates, they added keyboard shortcuts, which you know I'm a huge fan of for the alignment. And so what is that? Option V. Awesome. I'll be making use of that a lot in the future. And so I'm going to go ahead and reduce the size of these. I'm holding down Shift, so it reduces the size proportionally, something like that. And let's see here. Whoop, that's not what I meant to do at all. And let's see here. Also didn't mean to group them, my bad, ungroup. And let's see here. I'm going to add these to I'm going to make all of these icons into their own frame, and I'm going to do Shift A to apply auto layout, and this will allow me to easily adjust how much space there is between each icon. And right now we're set to 17. Let's try 40. Whoop. Frame 4, and let's see here. I want that centered. There we go. And I'll make this entire thing a frame at the end, which would be useful for making this into a component, which I imagine if you had more than one person on the team, you'd want to use components in Figma just to make your life easier. And so there we go, looking good so far. And then we have a little bit of information down at the end. So let's go ahead, and I don't feel like typing that out. Let's go to Lorem Ipsum generator. And let's see here, I'll go ahead and copy to about right there. Press T to activate the type tool, and I'm going to, let's see here, make a box about that big. Control V to paste all the information, and 14 is good, light is okay. Let's go ahead and automatically size the, get an automatic height for this box right here, looking good. Press Escape, move that up to where it's equidistant, to where the icon frame is equidistant between the, I guess, Twitter handle or social media handle and the bit of text right here, and a period right there. And then lastly, it looks like the very last line here is the title, or the I guess whatever job whatever job Christian Saragod Moen has, super blase, and so we're going to add something like UX designer. And I'll go ahead and center that. Everything's looking a bit the same, so I'm going to go semi-bold and make that about 20. Is that 20 also? That's 24. That's a bit too bold. Let's bump that down to medium. And let's try 18, looking a bit better. And let's see here. I'm going to hold down Alt and select, well, no, let's see here. Hold on Alt and select, sorry, hold on Alt and Shift and select that text, the entirety of this frame. And let's see here, we have our selection colors here, and let's see here, I'm going to change that to, I want all my fonts to be the same, so 4E, 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 and 4E. There we go. Excellent. So all of our fonts are the same color now. And that's not the worst thing in the world. Let's see here, let's spiff this up a bit. No, I was looking for small caps. No small caps with one of my favorite fonts, Outfit. That's okay, I can just call more. There we go. Okay, spacing's looking fairly decent. I can bring that down just a bit there. Something like that. Okay, again, doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, I say that, there we go. Doesn't have to be perfect. And so what we can do now is go ahead and use what we've learned about masks so far to create an icon, or create the mask object here in the center of the, let's actually frames for, let's call that icons. And I'm going to move that down a bit. Okay, and so we can create the profile image right here. And so to do that, I'm going to go over to Brave, go to Unsplash, find a, type too fast. Just type in person, doesn't matter, that looks good. We'll go ahead and copy that image. And I'm going to paste that to the side here. It's a bit large, so I'm going to reduce that for now. And I can, of course, since making masks is a non-destructive action, I can resize this after I've made the mask. And so by selecting just that layer in the mask object. And so I want to make sure I have the right size. So I'm going to zoom in on our example. I'll select the ellipse tool, and I want to get an ellipse that's about the size of the profile picture we have here. So I'm going to hold down Option and Shift. And we're looking at about 134 by 134. That'll work just fine. I'm going to move, click and drag that over here, and for the sake of visibility, let's go ahead and make that a different color. Okay, and I can tell that I need to reduce the size of the image, but I can do that afterward. And so as we discussed, and I want to put it right about here, but as indicated and as we discussed when making a vector object, the order things that we need to go in, or the order the layers need to be in order for the mask to work properly. We need the element, or we need the layer that we want to act as the mask to have a lower index than all of the layers that we are masking. And so if we look at this image right here, again from Figma, what I've done in the canvas over to the right is, in order to line things up, I put the ellipse on top of the image, which we know will not work because, of the z-index, and so we see the x here, but it's not going to work. I need to put the ellipse that I added below the image. And so again, having these two selected and making a mask out of that isn't going to give us what we're looking for. And so I need to have this ellipse below the image, which is, I shouldn't complain, but it's a tiny bit frustrating because it makes lining things up a bit more difficult. What I can do right here is just essentially guess where I want the mask to be. But that looks about right. Let's see here. This is Kyle Morton, and we'll call this profile mask. And so I can click and drag, because I need to rearrange the z-index of the layers here. I can click and drag profile mask layer, the ellipse, below Kyle Morton, and we can see the outline of the shape that it is more or less where I wanted it to be. And if I select both these layers, and we now see that the iconography in our toolbar has changed, I will select Use as Mask. And we've masked off the portion of the image that is outside of our masking layer, which is the ellipse, which I've called Profile Mask. And I can tell that this is the image itself is a bit too big, and so, and I can also tell the dimension of the whole image just by having my mouse over the image layer here. But if I select Kyle Morton, I can click the handles, and I'm holding down Option and Shift to keep the proportion and also have it scale it down from the middle. And I can also click and drag to where it looks like that. It's a bit difficult to see where the edge is because I use a black and white photo, which was my mistake. But we'll have a better idea of that in a second when I draw it onto the card, or when I drag it onto the card. And so looking good. Mask group, we'll call that profile pic. Okay, so I'm going to select that layer called profile pic. I'm going to drag it over here, looking pretty good. Okay, and looks like the last thing that we need to do is apply a drop shadow to the mask object. So with the profile pic mask object selected, I will click Effects, adds a bit of drop shadow, need something more than that, and so I'll click the sun icon to bring up the drop or the effects settings. Again, to match the drop shadow of the card itself, I only want a drop shadow on the y-axis or the vertical axis, and so let's try 12 again. Okay, blur. Okay, looks like it might be the same as the card, and so that works out just fine. I want to go ahead and close that, and then I want to make sure everything's looking good. The order that it should be in, Kyle Morton is here, here, and then the icons, UX designers at the very bottom. And so let's do that. Top area, gradient. There we go. And then the actual card itself. Okay, I want to select all those, and let's see here, make that into a group, call it frame 4. I'll call that profile card, and there we go. We now have a frame with many children in it, all named appropriately and all end frames if appropriate. And what we can do now is we could turn this card into a component. If we have, if we're designing a page on a website, for example, that is going to feature all of the different members of the dev team, we can create little profile cards for each by making instances, by placing instances of this component. And that is the use case example for when a mask might be appropriate. Now, of course, there are other ways of going about doing this. For example, you could have taken this photo that Mr. Morton here has given you, or maybe the photographer has given you, and you could take it into Photoshop, and you could select a ellipse marquee or circle marquee and simply crop out what you don't need, or save it as a PNG where everything outside the ellipse will have 100% or will have be completely opaque. Sorry, will be completely transparent. That's what I mean to say. And save it as a PNG, and then bring the PNG here. But that's a lot of extra work. You have to open Photoshop. Not that Photoshop's a chore. Photoshop's very fun, but we already have the tools at hand here in Figma to get the job done fairly quickly. And once we have this component, if we wanted to duplicate this card for someone else, let's say that I already made it a component and I placed another instance right here, all I would need to do is go into the mask object called Profile Pic, select Kyle Morton, go to Image and choose an image and change it to something else that we have. It could be, it could be anything really. I don't have anything here that's terribly appropriate, but we could select another individual's image and place it there and quickly create many different cards, we'll have many instances with different images here depending on who we're making a card for, and then we could just as easily change the text, change the social media handle, remove or add any additional icons here that would be appropriate for this person's online identity. Of course, we could change the little blurb and the job title as well. And so, yeah, that is how to use masks in Figma, and I gave an example of a use case right here. Hopefully all of this has made sense. Again, it's just one of those things that you'll need to practice with in Figma to make sure that you really grasp it. And 10, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, it'll be fairly natural for you to make masks. And yeah, that is it for this week's stream. I hope you found some value in this. And of course, if there are any questions or any concerns, you can find me at the regular chat apps, Discord, Skype, Slack. You can also send me a message from my portfolio website. It's billrix.design. That's billrix.design, billrix.design. And you can also check me out on YouTube. The channel name is Show Me UX, for I am in the show me state these days. Go ahead and subscribe there for updates, and I will add this video, this VOD, after I run it through Media Encoder. Lastly, don't forget to follow me on Twitch. You can sign up for notifications, just receive an alert when I am about to go live. And yeah, I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend, and I will see you next week.